Okay, hi, Mike. Um, so we have myself, Doug, John, and Mike, and we have Eli, Nikki, Will, Keith, and Christian for part of the meeting. So we've got a full house. So we'll ask about adjustments to the agenda. And you explain what you want for the adjustments again, Will?
Sure. It's basically just flipping the review of the infrastructure chapter to after talking about the schedule going forward. Just so Christian can be here for the scheduling and kind of, and then so the two agenda items of how to proceed with energy chapter and staff constraints, and then also Nikki made a timeline that might be a useful reference for that how do we go forward question. So, which I will share screen now, assuming
Everyone okay with that change?
Yeah, I didn't follow it.
Okay, but basically what we're going to do first in the meeting is discuss our timeline moving forward.
Okay.
And talk about any kind of staff time constraints or concerns of ours with keeping this regional plan project moving forward. So first, any public comments? Anyone? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of our minutes. So those are the minutes of our November minutes.
Mhm.
Okay, I did read through them. Did everybody read? Everybody's happy with them?
Yeah, they look good.
Take a motion on that?
Can I make one comment first?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I've explained my opinion in minutes before. I'll just do it briefly again. Having it be a transcription of all that was said during a meeting, I don't think it's the most helpful way to do these. I think that they should address topics, discuss what was discussed, but not he said, she said. So, but with that said, I'll vote in favor of the minutes. I would prefer to see them in a more standard format.
Does anyone else feel that way?
I actually, I understand that is one approach. We've when I was on the select board, we had this debate constantly. We would do the sparser kind of broad overview of approach to minutes, and then we couldn't remember what we covered in the prior meeting or the meeting three months prior. So then we went more detailed, and then members of the board then raised the concerns that Doug has raised. So after 18 years on the select board dealing with this, if people are willing to put the time and effort into more detailed minutes, it's not a negative. It's more work for the person putting them together. I see it as a benefit, particularly when we need to look back and see where we were or what we might have said. If there was ever a legal challenge, these minutes will back up what was said and done, and kind of like our legislative intent even. So
well, that's a double-edged sword, John.
Yeah, it is true.
Yeah.
So
okay,
I don't know.
Yeah, let's move ahead and vote.
Okay, so everybody approves the minutes.
Yes.
From November. Yes. Okay, so approved. And now we're going to move on to our discussion of our timeline and proposals to keep this regional plan moving forward and talk about staff time. And also we can discuss what we feel about our time also. Okay, so who's going to take it over?
Okay, I will do that. Hello, Nikki here. I am going to first talk about kind of the overall adoption process timeline if we are to make it in 2025. Let's say we have our draft plan ready by April, then it would have to go to Land Use Review Board to review the plan, and they have up to 60 days to provide feedback. So our hearings would not start until June and July time. And that will take at least 60 days. Then we move into August, we would have to do plan revisions, and that would lead to, if we are ready by then, for an adoption of the plan and submittal back to the land use review board, which would then be within 60 days after receipt of that plan, the land use review board would hold a public hearing. So that's kind of a 6-month process. Next slide, please.
Now
So
that's
this,
just for the land use?
that is for the regional plan.
Oh,
And yes, and land use mapping is alongside that. It's in tandem with this regional plan adoption process.
Or should maybe clarify, it doesn't have to be, but it would be much smoother and a lot less redundancy if it were. Like is that correct? The future land use map can be approved separately and that has to be done by 2025, but it's just basically much better.
I think so, because other regions aren't adopting their plan this year.
Right.
So, yeah, what has to be done in 2025, Nikki?
The future land use mapping determinations have to be done in 2025 by the end of the year. And
So say that
also,
again?
sorry, and the housing targets as well. Yeah.
So what we would do in that case is we'd have to amend our existing plan to add those in, and obviously, given the change in scope,
Yeah, I'm
They would
not
have to be-
sure, because other than every region would be doing that.
amending them,
Yeah.
yeah. It'll be an amendment for every region.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, wow,
you can't adopt them independently.
okay.
So, yeah, so that, and then that would be followed. So if we don't get the regional plan approved by the land use review board after this, all these steps that are basically spelled out here by the end of 2025. At the same time as we have to get the future land use map approved by land use review board, then so it would be that amendment to the regional plan, which would then be followed by and that has to, which would include the future land use map approved by the end of 2025. And then if we don't adopt the new regional plan in that same period and have it approved by the land use review board, then we'd have to do that whole process after this, again, with the whole regional plan, not just the future land use map, set back a few months after we go through the amendment following the approval of the future land use map. So
Okay.
all that's to say that there's a lot of steps after we get this done, and it would really behoove us to get it done by 2025
With this time.
with this timeline. We
And
have to get the future land use map done by 2025.
Is there a timeline you were gonna put up on screen?
Yeah, we're not seeing it on our screen. We're seeing a copy of the minutes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Stop share screen
Yeah. Share.
and then share.
Alright. This, and then. Alright. Now, share. Oh, I forgot I have to do this. Okay, is this a timeline we're now seeing? Sorry, I
Can
didn't
you
have that
zoom in a
before.
little bit, Will?
Apologies. Yeah, good call. Yes. Zoom in. Great. We all see the timeline. Sorry, that wasn't up earlier. Doug has his hand up, I see.
Yeah, Doug?
Yeah, where is the window in which our respective municipalities review a final draft before it goes off to the land use review board? At this point, my select board and planning commission haven't really seen anything.
yeah, so should we?
Will they get a
continue?
draft well in advance of April?
Okay, so that will move, so yes, we'll answer that question in a second.
Okay.
See, this is our upcoming regional plan committee review meetings that we are hoping to have. Right now, December infrastructure. Then into January, energy, February, housing and land use, March, introduction and climate resilience, just wrapping up our introduction and being ready for our final draft review in April. So this, if we could keep to the schedule, we could potentially make a 2025 deadline. Can you move to the next slide, please?
Okay.
So, and this is basically our chapter status currently. So in closest to final draft would be natural systems and economy and transportation. Second draft, infrastructure and energy. And then, first draft, you haven't seen housing and land use, which are big chapters that we'd like to complete in February. This all banks on if we're moving along the timeline for each month's meeting. And then finally in the next slide, so these are major milestones. So for spring, this would be our outreach to municipalities, and this would happen in tandem with the land use review board feedback. So we would allow a minimum of 90 days. I mean, ideally, we would love to start outreach in February, and that it'll probably go on till June. But we hope to have a final draft by April, so that we can, give it to the land use review board. They have their 60-day feedback period. Then we can start by early summer for public hearing process, and then by late summer, start our adoption process. And then into fall, we have our land use review board determination. So this is all if we keep, with
sorry we haven't had a chance to go over this internally. Part of the reason why I wanted to make sure I was in this meeting. I think we'd be starting in January or as soon as possible with our housing targets and our future land use map engagement with planning commissions. And select boards, because those are the two pieces that will most directly impact local planning. So we want to get that out in front of folks early so they have a chance to comment early and often.
So I'm surprised that the municipal review occurs in the same time frame as the review by the Land Use Resource Board. Is that what has happened in the past?
This has totally changed.
Everything's a little new this year. Prior to Act 181, we didn't have this 60-day land use review board review period. We had 2 public hearings we needed to complete prior to adoption. So you could go through the process in more like 90 days and still allow time to incorporate new comments. This is essentially doubled that timeline. That's why we're talking about May and June as our drop dead dates to bring this forward.
And how does the Land Use Review Board review process and completion allow for changes requested by municipalities to be incorporated into the plan?
I would bounce that question. I don't know if staff has the answer on hand today, but if municipalities came back with a major change that the Regional Planning Commission agreed with, how would we incorporate that change into the plan? And what additional reviews would Land Use Review Board need to take?
See, this is why I asked for some early chapters to be shared with the towns.
Yep.
As soon as possible to reduce the scope of that possible conflict.
Doug, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Or my question. You're
and
reading my mind here.
Do it, okay, but
Yeah.
it seems like a good idea to me.
Yeah, my question is, what can we bring to our planning commissions now? Like, what do we feel comfortable with that there's enough of a solid draft that we can bring them to begin review? Now, I would say myself, I would immediately go to the natural resources chapter. I would then go economy chapter and the transportation chapter. So those are 3 that have meaty drafts right now that I think we can ask for questions on, because take a look at them and see what you think and give me some responses. It seems to me we haven't even really fully reviewed housing or the land use chapter yet, and land use mapping yet. Mike?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of give my thought that I actually like the approach the RPC put together, the staff put together. And the reason for that is having that overlap. I'd like to see the drafts get to the full board. If it gets to the towns and the committees, and there's some blowback, it might be people are going to be coming back and going and talking to the commissioners and saying, why are you guys recommending this? And the commissioners are going to be in a place of saying, we haven't even seen it. We haven't even looked at it. It hasn't even gotten on our plates. So these are just early drafts. So I kind of like the fact that this is going to get put together and go to the full board, and the full board is going to say yes, and then it can go to the public, and it can go to the land use review board. And I have to imagine, I mean, I don't even know if the land use review board has been set yet. I don't even know where they're at. So that process is, I don't know how ready they're going to be, but if they are doing their reviews, I think they have to anticipate it's going to be an iterative process. They might have some recommendations for changes. Towns might have some recommended for changes. And then it's going to be probably working with the staff, or because there's the land use review board and there's the staff to the land use review board. Whichever one our staff would be working with is going to be going through and saying, okay, what if we make this change? What do you guys think of that? They might say, well, we kind of like the way Two Rivers put this together, and we like the way Northwest put this together in this way. So we think you should move in that direction, and they would bring it to us and we could approve or not approve that change. And vice versa, we would go through and say, well, our towns have these concerns about this. What do you think at the land use review board? I think there's going to be an iterative process. It's why they're doing the review before the final adoption. So I kind of like the way they're doing it. I'd rather see the full board get a chance to have set eyes on it, even if it's this is the draft we're going to be going to public hearing with. Let's go and get the town's opinion. Let's get land use review opinion.
So what we need to be doing as town reps is keeping our planning commission and the select board apprised of the general progress and any significant issues that we see in order to be doing our jobs as reps. Because what you're saying, Mike, makes sense.
Yeah, that would be my thought. I mean, I'm not saying the way you guys are looking at it is necessarily wrong. That would be just my concern would be that the full board hasn't gotten a chance to see at it. And if there's something missing, John's had a lot of comments on the lack of substance in the 248 process, and the towns may have that concern, and we might be able to go through and John might get pushback saying, hey, why isn't there anything on the 248? And he would say, well, we hadn't even gotten to the full board yet. So I think it can be done either way. I would prefer the way the RPC staff has suggested, because I'd like to see our full board set their eyes on it too.
Now, what we have done, and I think back, we talked about and agreed to presenting to the Board of our Board of Commissioners what we're working on. So there has been a presentation to the full board of the Natural Resources chapter, which Lincoln Fresca did. And there was a presentation on the Transportation chapter, which Reuben McMartin did. Did we do any other ones?
Economy, right?
Economy.
Yeah.
Which one?
Economy and working land.
So, and I think I might have mentioned at the last Board of Commissioners meeting that we were moving on to the infrastructure chapter today at our next meeting. So the question is, what do we want to do? Do we want to continue that process of bringing draft chapters to the Board of Commissioners and making a presentation? Or do we want to wait and bring the full plan to the Board of Commissioners? I mean, I think they should know what we're working on.
It seems like a good idea to share chapters as they're ready with the full board. I mean, what do other people think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I guess I haven't been taking into consideration the fact that these drafts have been over time been going through, but I hadn't known how final we were calling them. I know they were being presented. I didn't know how much we were considering them closer to final drafts, but we have been, you're correct, we have been going through and presenting them to the full board over time, and those could probably be going out for input if people wanted, especially if staff don't expect to make any more changes.
Right, and I think that's what we haven't determined. Are they final? Or, you know, at what point do we have time in here to incorporate any kind of comments, requests for change, additions, etc.? Like, there really is very little time in here for a second review of some of the chapters we already have done a first review on. So I don't know what to call final or not.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yes.
With our monthly meetings, could we have 2 meetings a month to get our chapters ready? Could you go to the slide with the meetings? Yeah, so, you know, January 7th, is our energy chapter review, and, you know, Sam is prepared to send you a draft for that. And we're also thinking we might need another meeting later that month. I don't know if it will be for energy, or we could start introducing housing by that time. I think moving forward, if we are to make the deadline, I think we have to start doubling up on chapters each month, and also maybe doing more of a bulk presentation to the board on our more final drafts, and then we could, it might just make it a more streamlined process, and it might go a little faster.
It's basically, you're just promote, I mean, the
Yeah.
idea for this next 3 months, January, February, March, doing 2
Yes.
meetings each month, just to get,
Yeah.
really get that up for April.
Or, and maybe we won't need 2 meetings a month if we find enough resolution, you know, during the meeting, the one meeting.
But we would still do 2 meetings a month to be able to finalize all of the chapters.
I would think so.
I'm fine with attending 2 meetings a month.
I can do that.
Yeah, it's a short window. I mean, I can
Yeah.
work that into my schedule as best I can.
Yeah, our outreach process is going to be very significant, moving into January, so we're gonna be very busy. But we have a big team here now, so we can, you know, we can prioritize regional plan, but also get out and start future land use mapping determinations with municipalities. So, I mean, I'm already starting that, and so, I mean, we all are.
And what's your process for that, Eli?
It's Nikki, but it's, the
Sorry,
process
Nikki.
for future land use mapping. Well, we're still, I guess we're in early stages. But on Thursday, we're actually going to go over a training, how we're expecting to reach out to municipalities and what is basically needed from the municipalities for future land use mapping. So it's,
Okay.
yeah, it's not going to be a quick process, but it's also, it has to happen alongside the regional plan. And our housing targets, because our housing targets are based off of the future land use mapping determinations or methodology. So it's a complicated process, but I think we are moving forward with it. And yes, we're getting close for January. So.
All right, I'm going to ask a question here that I just came off of climate action planned meetings and the most amazingly annoying, cumbersome process ever. But it got done and it got presented. There was a deadline, just like this. Substitute land use review board with climate action council, okay? And boy, I'm going to tell you though, us doing the work, boy, was there squawking on the compressed timeline. And there was I mean, anybody wants to give Chris Campany a call. He was the cheerleader. And we really felt that our time was way too compressed. And the deadline didn't consider that at all. And there was a lot of stuff that didn't get into what we wanted. Does anybody feel, I'm just going to put it out here about how everybody, the committee members are feeling about this process? Or does
Well,
it, yeah?
Well, I guess I'll say that this schedule is a lot, accomplishes a lot more in a short period of time than has been accomplished in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
From where I sit. Now, I haven't seen the progress that's been made on all the chapters that haven't been presented to us. So to me, this looks like a push, but doable.
Okay. John and Mike, do you feel that way?
I think the process has been, as it's been laid out, makes sense, and it's still aggressive time frame, but it's what needs to be done, and I don't see it any other way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the state's kind of boxed us into a corner of having to rush through this. So I think that's kind of what we'll have to do.
Okay. I just wanted to put that out there because, just went through it. Okay, so this would be starting in January, 2 meetings a month. And does anybody have preferences on that? Like, stick with Thursdays, 2 weeks apart, or 1 week apart, or
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays?
We're
Okay.
Isn't that what we
usually
generally do?
Tuesday. That's what we usually do.
Okay.
So the first and third Tuesdays of the month.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Let me
Except for
check.
January,
Except for January.
we were thinking the 28th.
Right,
Because we're meeting the second Tuesday, right?
It's
No,
first Tuesday,
First
and
Tuesday.
he's away the third Tuesday.
yeah, I'm away the week before, the second week of January. I don't know, or we
We
could
could
just
still
do
hold
it.
it. I mean,
Here, you like
yeah.
trade off for managing that meeting.
Yeah, we'll have to check CVRPC's calendar, so let me just do this real quick, it might not show up on.
Why don't you send out a doodle poll with all the dates so staff can, or so members can make sure that the secondary days are free, and if we need to move around because there's a holiday
Mhm.
Mhm.
or something, you can do that through email and do a doodle poll.
Okay.
The first and third are the 7th and the 21st,
Yeah,
not the 20th.
right, so, but then it's just that I'm gonna be, on
You're
January,
gone
I'm
on the
gonna be
21st.
gone on, yeah, so, okay, and then okay, the TAC is on the 4th Tuesday. Oh, that's after though, that's at 6 p.m. So, okay, so, all right, I'll send around a doodle poll, but I guess we'll tentatively plan for first and third Tuesdays. Does that sound good to everyone? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, cool, great.
Your turn to herd the cats, Will.
Huh.
It's your turn to
Uh,
herd the cats.
Cool.
Okay.
Have a good evening, everyone. I gotta hop off.
Thank you.
So before we leave this topic, I'd like to make one request, which is that future chapters that come to this committee for review have been put into the agreed upon format that we're using, which I believe is currently the economy chapter. And I would also like to see that the outlines respect the rules of outlines, and that there can't be a 3.1 if there's no 3.2. I mean, let's start doing it right. And do that work that's needed to get these in format sooner rather than scrambling to do it at the end.
And this was a question that I had in a conversation with Keith. I had a conversation with Ruben, just about staff time and their availability to do this kind of formatting. And if what would be the pressure if every chapter writer, staff person, had to do that format? Or is it possible to do like a team effort of, a couple of staff members contributing to do the formatting?
I think we had talked about, like, you're the editor in chief, right? But the
Yeah.
kind of the final would go through Will to make all of the chapters comply with that format.
So you see doing that at the completion of the process?
Yeah, I'm not that I've been, this is Keith. Most of these, as I say, just like the infrastructure chapter, actually, most of this was drafted last spring. So, at this point, it's after the fact when somebody's going to be going back and doing whatever edits to make it fit the format. Because most of these chapters, at least that you've reviewed probably so far, were drafted while we were working, before we did the readoption, while we were trying to draft this plan. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, that not that much has actually been drafted here recently. Most of it was drafted and then with some updates put in. So it's, it's after the fact either way at this point.
So what's the argument for doing later rather than doing it sooner?
Well, that's
Economy
right.
of scale. Because it's really, I mean, honestly, it's just gonna be me doing it. So, yeah, I mean, it's economy of scale, just doing it all at the same time versus piecemeal, one chapter at a time, or which, whatever, I can do it.
I think the other argument might be that all the changes would have been made at that point, like the chapter would be in a final state.
Right.
So
right.
if you're trying to format
Mhm.
and then there's gonna be changes made, then you're
Yeah.
gonna have to go and format again.
That's
So maybe
a
I'm using the wrong word. Maybe I mean structure rather than format. It's not a question of fonts and spacing.
Right.
It's a question of how is information grouped and presented. So I think structure is a better word for what I'm asking. And it does matter if, we're looking at a draft for infrastructure, which has goals and strategies spread throughout the document. Well, that was something we moved away from months ago. And now the review that the committee is doing is looking at a document that could have been cleaned up fairly easily in that regard. And now it isn't. We're looking at detailed breakdowns that go to section, subsection, subsection in some chapters, but not in others. Will those just be combined and doctored in the final review? Why wouldn't we be drafting them in a consistent fashion?
Well, I'm going to go to bat for Keith on this one.
Okay.
Keith was tagged last minute and contacted by me to, can you do the infrastructure chapter for the next meeting? He became next, he jumped up in line for this. So
Okay.
Keith has given us what he has so far.
Right.
So I understand that. I also know how much work I'm doing with Keith right now, and I'm really pounding him right now. So I'm gonna, I can see him laughing. But I think moving forward on the chapters we're going to get, can we get them that way, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
let's try and get them in that structure.
I mean, we're supposed to be seeing housing and land use in February and climate resilience in March. It would seem to me that
Right.
if there's still drafting work being done on those could be brought into the final format, final structure, excuse me, and presented to us that way for review.
And the final structure that you want to see is what's present in the economy chapter?
Yeah, I think that's what we agreed to. If someone has a different idea, I'm open to it, but I think we went through a bunch of alternatives back in June, and that was the format we came up with. And if people feel differently, we should have that discussion really soon, but I think that's what we talked about.
And that would give less pressure for Will to get the rest of them done.
Yeah.
And if
Not the biggest issue we face, but it seems like we could
Right.
do it and it would streamline the process.
And Keith will have loads of time to do it for us.
I can help with that, Keith.
It's not, I said to move them all back to the beginning of the chapter, that only takes a few minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
not a big deal.
Yeah, he's almost got an outline now. It's, reviewing the chapter and moving things around to be in the right structure. So don't worry, Keith, you can do it.
Heck yeah.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the work staff's doing.
Yes.
I'm not criticizing it. I'm trying to make our review process more productive and get into it sooner is the goal I'm pushing for.
Okay. And I'm thinking that what I'll do as chair is put together a presentation for the next Board of Commissioners meeting about the regional plan, where we're at, and see if there's another draft chapter we can talk about and our timeline. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sure I'll be tapping all of you to help. Okay, if we're happy with where we're at with these, I would call them housekeeping, but they're more than that, these critical issues. Can we move on now to actually reviewing the content of the infrastructure chapter? And Doug and I have been reviewing it in leading up to this meeting. And I think Doug has been able to dig into it more than I have. But our question becomes, does this become one chapter or two chapters? An infrastructure chapter, and then what are we calling it, Doug? A community support chapter? Community.
Yeah, I mean, we'd had this discussion, 4 months ago, and
Yeah.
agreed on it being a single chapter. And having read the chapter now, it seems like the argument for separating it is pretty good. And it could stay one chapter. It's not, it's wrong the way it is. It seems like it would be better in two separate chapters to me and to Alice when we were looking at it. And the splitting it would be breaking the content apart and cross-referencing. If health is in the services chapter, the physical infrastructure of hospitals is referred into that chapter. But with that said, it could stay the way it is. I just wanted to ask the question, now that we've all had a chance to look at it, do we still agree with that?
Can I speak to a little bit of the background on the chapters being separate and then being separate chapters and then being brought into one?
Yes.
So we had started this process with it being a separate chapter called Healthy Populations, which was really a lot around the services. And what we found, and Keith and I had this conversation kind of in circles, is that there's not a lot of statute that supports there being a separate chapter. The statute actually all kind of fit into the infrastructure chapter, and we'd have to tear apart and actually duplicate statute that was in the infrastructure chapter to create the Healthy Populations chapter. The only statute that really related to the goal of the healthy population, which was to stimulate a healthy, active, and connected population in communities that work for all residents. A lot of that statute was transportation related. So we took the elements of walkable cities and those sorts of pieces and put them into transportation. And then everything else really fell into the infrastructure chapter, kind of under there's the facilities of services, and then there's the actual, social infrastructure of services. So there was no required element. Every other chapter has a required element. So the infrastructure chapter's required element is element number 5. And that captured a lot of what we were trying to capture in the healthy populations chapter. So that's kind of the trajectory of how we landed here with the healthy populations chapter being reabsorbed, which is the way that it was in the previous or in our current plan, which is the services, utilities, and or utilities, facilities, and services. So I kind of, we went back and forth and then kind of landed here, and I can see why it was presented that way in past plans, because it is, as far as statute goes, very difficult to tease it out into a separate chapter without being redundant.
Are you talking about the required elements of the municipal plan statute, which lists?
Yeah,
the
both, both the statute requirements, and then there's the required element, and then there's the state requirements. So making sure that both of those fit, and that's kind of where it landed. So I'll let you guys make your decision, but that's just a little bit of background on the staff side of how we've gone through drafting this.
And
some of our reasoning for why we put it all back together in the end.
Yeah.
I do believe last meeting when we discussed this, when we reached that decision, was we, correct me if I'm wrong, folks, we decided to rename it to Utilities, Facilities, and Services chapter, match the statute, and then also kind of encompass beyond. It's not just like telephone lines. And then I think we just forgot to actually just change the title, but yeah.
Right, and a lot of the statute, like for emergency services or hospitals are the perfect example, where they talk about the facilities of hospitals and those kinds of systems. And then they talk about the healthcare system as a social infrastructure, but the statute is the same. What we found ourselves having to do was say the statute in infrastructure and then say the exact same statute again in healthy populations, which we really, I don't think want to be doing that in our chapters.
I'm going to talk about content here in the healthy, what did you call it? Healthy neighborhood?
Populations was what we,
Healthy populations, okay. I'm going to go and call it public health. One of the things that Climate Action Plan did in the rural resources chapter that my subcommittee was working on is we had 3 task groups. We had infrastructure, we had communities, excuse me, community services, and we had public health task groups. Now, you're absolutely correct. The infrastructure folks and the community support services had a lot of discussion about duplication of strategies and actions. There was a lot of, or should we just talk about these things being together? There's a lot of talk about cross-cutting. There's a lot of talk about what can we eliminate here, but have in here. Public health was brand new to the Climate Action Plan. So public health, I mean, they really didn't know what to do with this. We had a strategy with actions under it. And, I'm looking at, in the other task groups, and they're having like, 6 strategies and 14 actions. And, we were like, we've got like 1 strategy and like 5 critical actions under it. Like all public health is, and healthy population is bringing forward how do we stay healthy during climate action impacts? How can we stay healthy? And we had 5 areas. We had exactly what you're talking about, vector-borne and waterborne diseases. we had extreme temperatures, we had flooding and rapidly running water, and the fifth, oh, and air quality in many forms. So those were like the overarching ones. So I would suggest I can send you some slides of what we landed on. We got the least questions. Everybody said this sounds good. But our overarching mission was to say that we want to bring, we want to create health equity by making sure that we're bringing public health information and services to all residents in Vermont, that it doesn't matter your economic, social status. We're looking at the underserved, we're looking at the homeless, etc. So I can send some information, and I would encourage in content for this to add some sentences that describe that.
That describe the health equity piece?
Yeah, that describe why we're working for healthy populations.
Yeah, I mean, the opening sentence speaks to health equity, and that is what a lot of the healthy populations have. But I think that the health equity could probably be incorporated more throughout the chapter. And maybe it's something as simple as having, each chapter has this aspiration. Maybe this chapter has two aspirations, and one of those is more the public health side of things. Because we did have an aspiration for the healthy populations, and maybe we just have two aspirations for this chapter, if it stays a single chapter.
Yeah, I'll send you some of the slides and work we did, and you can see if you can use it here or anywhere.
Yeah, the other piece is we do have quite a bit of equity work that was a part of that healthy populations chapter that we still have an archived draft of. And we had talked about actually incorporating the equity piece, including health equity, into our introduction. So we're actually talking about the regional plan on a whole from that equity standpoint.
Yeah, in this way, it brings us in alignment with, I wouldn't even talk about the climate action plan rewrite, but it brings alignment with what the Public Health Task Group tried to do, which really is to elevate the knowledge and to elevate the importance.
The other piece, I talked about the statute duplication. Now that Will is scrolling through, that was actually the piece where Keith and I really kind of landed on it, that the goals and strategies were definitely being duplicated. And so we didn't want to get into a situation where we had public water systems in two different chapters, or air quality in two different chapters, with the reiterating the same goals and strategies. It seemed to make more sense to combine them, but differentiate the physical infrastructure from the social.
Yeah, so it's just a suggestion, because then, maybe you can tighten things up a bit too.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Anyone else have comments?
So I had a couple of comments at the start. So I, from the perspective of the aspiration, it kind of seemed a little more action oriented than aspirational. And it also really only covered part of what was being discussed in the chapter. So I didn't know if it would be more appropriate to have it laid out as the aspiration to be for Central Vermont region, for the Central Vermont region to have effective and efficient utilities, facilities, and services that support public health and environmental sustainability. Because it's going to be confusing just to use the word infrastructure when we're also talking about services. Even if we understand it in our wonky way, I think the public and our other boards won't. And I think we want to be more than just cost effective with those. We do want to be effective and efficient. And I think the efficient captures that cost effective piece. So
Yeah.
I thought that would clean that up a little bit and expand it to include more of the chapter. There's the second sentence that just starts out as a goal. I don't know if that was just somebody putting down some thoughts, but that one line goal is to show an accurate representation of the facilities within the region. Just seems like an orphaned statement that was still sitting out there. On the introduction, I thought the introduction was mostly utility-ish. It really didn't talk about anything else. It was really focused mostly on those utility-oriented pieces. So I thought either we're going to have two separate, as you were just mentioning, two separate introduction statements, or expand that one. And then a little bit related to that, the first part of the public works, section 1 on the third page, the introduction really doesn't sound like an introduction to public works. It really sounds like something that should be in the introduction, because it really is talking about something more than just public works. And then I just had a couple of small comments on the next couple of pages. I read the whole thing. Most of my comments happen to be just here in the start. On strategy 1.8, assist municipalities in planning for an installation of decentralized community wastewater treatment systems in villages, hamlets, and clustered housing developments. I'm not sure if those are decentralized or centralized. If you're taking everybody's wastewater and you're putting it into a system, it may be a smaller centralized system, but maybe wastewater talks about things differently. But I would think if you have a community mound system, that would be a centralized system, not a decentralized system.
And if you have a treatment facility where everything goes to, that's centralized, right?
That's centralized as well. So, working on a decentralized system for a village would mean helping. We've got a village with 14 houses, and we're going to help each one of those 14 houses have its own wastewater treatment system. That's a decentralized approach. A centralized approach would say, we've got 14 houses in this village. We're going to collect them all, and we're going to put it into a single pipe. That pipe's going to go to a group mound system where we're going to treat all 14 houses in one location. That would be a centralized system. So I think it says decentralized. I think it should say centralized.
I think we were trying to, Mike, on that one, I think we were trying to reference the Warren type system where they have the multiple small systems basically that, trying to reference that type of system, but we can definitely clean that language up to explain that better.
You could speak to scale, smaller scales, centralized as opposed to scale, or whatever you want to call it, urban scale, like Montpelier or Barry.
Yep. Yeah. So strategy 1.11, engage with
You move down, Will.
Oh, sure.
With the use of shoreline zoning powers in compliance with the Shoreline Protection Act to regulate and design sanitary facilities on lands adjacent to surface waters. I don't believe we actually have that right. I think after 2005, the state has taken over full authority on wastewater, and we can't, as a municipality, say anything. But you can double check on that. But I don't think after 2005 we have that power as a municipality anymore.
I think you're correct, Mike, because we have some on the river recreation, like everybody jumping off the covered bridge in Waitsfield. And there's a pocket park there now. And I think it was the Mad Path put in structures for porta potties that are out there during seasonal, like late spring, summer. And that required a DEC permit and I think a floodplain permit, because you couldn't just plunk them there. You had to have a structure for securing them. So the municipality had to comply with state requirements or be fined or have to remove them. And they have to, also, they can only be out for 6 months and then they have to be moved somewhere else out of what's a flood zone. So you're right.
But yeah, just wanted to check on.
Yeah.
And then the one right below it on 112, it has some wording issues. Engage with on retrievable record systems. So some cleanup on that one. On the next page, there's a reference to a table. We don't have a table number. We should have a table number on that. And it's the table's also talking about the amount of capacity that's available in these various water systems.
Mhm.
And it has the population served, it has the average flow, but what the table was trying to show was how much these could be expanded, because these are the systems with capacity to expand. But then we don't actually have a column in there that says how much the capacity is. And I would just say, if you look at your wastewater chart, which is a couple pages later, that does have it. And it's kind of, it has, this is the amount that we use, and this is the amount that's unused flow. And I think this one could have another chart in it, or another column in it that says unused or available capacity.
You're
And I
also
And I think that covered most of the ones at the start that I had. Then my next section I had comments on was down in section 3 with communications.
Mhm.
And my comments on communications was that we've got the goal and we've got strategies 3.1 to 3.4, all of which that are really talking only about telecommunication towers. And our communication goals are really more than that, broadband infrastructure, radios, TV, a lot of things, but our goals and strategies only talk about telecommunication towers. Not Wi-Fi, not downtown, not anything else, just telecommunication towers. So our communications plan, and it does, I mean, you've got communication goals and strategies, and your first thing is 3.1, we start talking about telephones. And 3.3, we talk about cable and fiber optic, where we have a goal, which should be moved over to the other goal, and some strategies that start talking about cable and fiber optic. So I think those should all be in one place, and I think our goals could be expanded to be a little bit more inclusive of all types of communications. And I'll get back to more of those later when we get to the actual list of the this guy, the side by side, because I think John, I can see a lot of John's comments, and I was thinking about what he had commented on when I was reading through the side by side of the two. But I think in this document, those were my comments. I'm sorry I monopolized a bunch of the time there, but those were the comments I had noted when I reviewed it.
I'd just add a point of clarification. If we go back to, was it 1.11, Mike? You were talking about the law change in 2005 regarding septic systems, I guess. Actually, the statute changed in 2002, and then the rule was implemented thereafter. Must be the 2005 you're referencing, but just a point of clarification that Mike is correct that municipalities as of that law change, could no longer regulate septic design and the like. But to the extent that local zoning, planning and zoning, and I guess regional planning and zoning, we wanted to get that detailed. Establish setbacks for all types of development. That as long as it was consistently applied across all development, then wastewater systems could be required to meet those setbacks. Lacking that, leach fields can be pretty darn close to streams, which I was actually a participant in that legislative discussion in 2002, and I tried to get that language tightened up, but I lost that battle with A&R. My own boss, Chris Recchia, was pushing for the weakest possible standards, which put our rivers and lakes at great risk, and he won that battle. So municipalities want to ensure that their lake shores, the water quality is maximally protected. They would need to develop planning and zoning that speaks to setbacks for all types of development, and then that would constrain the development of wastewater disposal systems within that setback. That's the only little bit we have. So just wanted that clarification to be put out there.
No, you're right, John.
Yeah, you might be able to change the word design to location, and that would be more appropriate, because we can't regulate the design of sanitary facilities. That's completely out of our authority. But and I haven't seen any case law, but I think there might be room with what John is saying. If you have a water setback that says you can't have any development within 50 feet of a lake shore, let's say, then that would include the septic tank and septic field, because that falls under development. You can't regulate the design of it, but you can say it can't be in that area. You would be allowed to prohibit things from that area.
And that was testified, that was testified to by A&R officials. The attorney that was handling that legislative act in 2002 spoke to this, that if municipalities wanted to establish more stringent setbacks than are minimally required by A&R, then they would have to apply those setbacks to all infrastructure, all development. So
Waitsfield has fluvial erosion hazard zoning, and so the way that will eventually morph into our river corridor rules and plans. But what happens is for example, we had a developer that needed a place, excuse me, for his leach field, and he was required to be I'm sorry.
swallowed a mouse, Alice.
Anyhow, he was required to have it setback from the river. I'm sorry.
Hey, Will, get her a glass of water, would you?
Martini.
So I don't know if we wanted to talk about the I don't know what you guys call the walkthrough or the crosswalk. Because I had a couple of questions as I went through the crosswalk as well. So
Yeah,
you know,
in the crosswalk, we tried to clean up some of the language that was more still left, that was aspirational. Those didn't all get included in the draft that you all had just reviewed for this. I apologize for that. That definitely tried to remove, that especially after the Two River presentation, the encourage type language and trying to get more into direct implementation of how we can implement that language instead of aspirational. And
so
actually, I took the goals for both wastewater and water, we combined into one section, just water, wastewater combined as well. Because some of them are we're kind of redundant,
Yeah, I didn't have anything about the water and wastewater. The first question I had was that the electric power goal does not and strategies doesn't have a walkthrough. Is that because that's in the energy chapter, or is that because you haven't completed the walkthrough, or because they were all removed?
That was actually wasn't completed by the time we sent this out. And we were still breaking up what should go in the energy chapter and what pieces of that should end up in the infrastructure. So ideally, we were hoping to get that completed. Sam, I know, was even working on that some today. With the idea of, this being a pretty big chapter, we were hoping to at least review the rest of it. And then at that next meeting, when you review energy, that can be finalized, and whatever goals and strategies that would go with the infrastructure then could just be put into this to move forward with.
Okay. No, I just was curious, just for putting it on the table, making sure it was there.
Yep.
And where I started to have some concerns, I think, was as I worked my way down and got to the historic and archaeological. The first thing I kind of observed in a lot of the way the historic and archaeological was laid out is it seemed to keep going back to referencing floods. And, I think historic and archaeological resources are a goal in the state regional plans, regardless of the flood. But it seems like every strategy and everything kind of was like municipalities are encouraged to provide historic preservation in their municipal plans that align with flood safety. I don't know if we need to have that qualifier in there.
Okay.
And that shows up in just about every single strategy related to this, was that it goes back to, it says if only historic buildings that are not in the flood zone. And then in number 6, where an area is not designated as a historic district, but where the building is of local significance, the project should be designed to maintain the historic character of the area. There really wasn't a comparable one that says where a historic building is in a historic district. So I don't know why we've got that qualifier in there.
Okay.
And then also there were some of these that in the 2016 were really written to have Act 250 impacts where you could actually apply them to a project. So, if you're looking at maybe 8 and 9 activities that have a substantial impact on a historic site or structure, in this case says should be planned in consultation with Division of Historic Preservation. Additions to a historic building should be designed to minimize visual impacts. Those are good Act 250 policies if we change the shoulds to shalls, but looking at where we're going, I don't see a lot of Act 250 policies that are left within our structure that we have. As I read through these, encourages restoration and rehabilitation and adaptation of historic structures where feasible outside the flood hazard area. So we don't care about them if they're in the flood hazard area. And then it kind of jumps to the other page. Number 10, land development adjacent to or on important prehistoric and historic archaeological sites should be designed to minimize the impact on the site. I would be more likely to keep that and put shall. If we want to have, again, this goes to if we want to have any ability to use this in an Act 250 review, it has to say shall, and we have to have it. But right now, if I read through the 9 strategies that we have here, none of them are Act 250 policies that we can apply to a historic project. So again, it's a policy question of, from the board standpoint, do we want to have that ability if somebody proposes to, we have a project of significant impact, of regional significant impact, we're going to review it for Act 250 and the regional plan conformance. Do we want to have the ability to, say, protect a historic resource? Because right now, somebody could build something on an archaeological resource and we wouldn't have an ability to object to it because we don't have a policy in our plan that says we want to protect those resources. And this starts to come in again, and I'm sure John will have opinions as we get to the next section on wireless telecommunication resources. I'm seeing that same loss of those Act 250 policies, that some of them existed in the 2016, some of them existed and weren't written very well, and we could make an improvement on them as we move down. But those were the 2 sections that I found that I thought we should have a policy discussion on, because we're not going to have any teeth in an Act 250 for historic and archaeological protections. And I think we're going to have less teeth in our wireless telecommunication facilities ones.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Mike. I mean, the shoulds don't work. On the telecommunication facilities, should be cited. Doesn't work. It's weak. In fact, town of Worcester used to have shalls, and then they went to should, and they went back to shalls, and it's very similar language. So.
I mean, we participate. I mean, jumping to the telecommunications 3.1, the new 3.1, promote telecommunications should be cited. Shall be cited, designed to maintain, to operate, minimize negative impacts on natural, cultural, and scenic resources. Use of stealth and design, and/or use of are encouraged where appropriate. Again, it's a policy question. Shall be applied. It's the policy. Do we want to require them to use stealth, or do we want to have a softer language? And that's a policy question. But I'm with John. I think we should, really strongly think about strengthening that should to shall, and are encouraged, I think, is really just a suggestion. And then 3.4, it says we will participate in Act 250 and 248 process to ensure that new towers and necessary infrastructure follow best management practices to minimize impact on erosion and stormwater management. Again, best management practices. I would like to see a little bit more of what we mean by best management practices, as laid out by ANR, as laid out at another part of this plan, or is there a document? Is there a best management practice manual somewhere that we can address? But I think there are some of these other ones. We've got 1, 2, and 3 on the left side. where we could consider taking some of those. And again, these were, I thought, not very strong either. Number 4, permits for towers should require a financial mechanism to ensure they're removal by service providers should they be abandoned. I would make that should a shall. And I know the comment says it's up to the contract negotiations with landowners. There's no mechanism for enforcement, but there is in the Act 250. You can require it as a part of the Act 250 permit, and we have done that. I did that when I was in Lamoille County for towers. If a tower gets abandoned, it's in the Act 250 permit that says, as a condition of the approval, if this tower is no longer in use, that it has to be removed within X number of days, years, months, whatever. So you can't leave an abandoned tower up on a hilltop. You have to remove it and you have to revegetate the site per the condition of the permit.
And just for clarification, telecommunication tower developers, under some law changes not that many years ago, under this process called 248A, Section 248A, that's a PUC process. They now have the option of either going through Act 250 or through the PUC 248A process. And within that process, the Act 250 criteria, review criteria are incorporated. So they're writing the plan, as Mike suggests, would provide us teeth in both of those venues. So it's important.
So does this mean we're giving direction to staff to incorporate shall, must into these sections? I'm not quite sure how this process works.
Yeah,
I wanted to put it on the table for conversation. My personal opinion is I would think we should take, and I haven't circled them, but I did make a note, 3, 4, 8, 9, and 10 all seemed like they should come over as strategies, as well as the adjustments that we already had to 3.1 and 3.4 of the new side. But I'm willing to accept some other ones, but I had put notes next, Act 250 next to number 3, 4, 8, 9, and 10.
Those are from 2016 though, aren't they?
Those were from 2016 and not brought over to 2024. I'm suggesting we should bring them over to 2024 and change the shoulds to shalls. So that way we can actually use them in an Act 250 or Act 248 hearing. Otherwise we don't have them. Or if we just brought them straight over, I think they're too weak to be effective. So I think it's at least worth the policy discussion of bringing them over and strengthening them. And then if the full board doesn't want to take that step, they can take that step. But I think as a committee, I would like to think the committee recommendation would be we move those over and we strengthen the language in the new plan.
Yeah, and as I've said earlier, it's important that this plan be of assistance to our municipalities and not a threat. So if I were a developer and I saw this plan as being weaker than what we maybe even wanted to see or what the town wants to see, they could use it as a bludgeon to force a project through that's the town doesn't want to see. When I'm talking about telecommunication towers in this case. So we should make it more stringent. And if municipalities want to go weaker, maybe we could have some caveat language in there that provided the impact is not regional, or it's sub-regional, however we want to phrase it. And it's in keeping with strategies laid out by the municipality for telecommunication development. CVRPC will support it, but it's going to be important to frame the language so it can't be used against our member towns in support of projects they do not support. So.
Yeah, because I think we could work with the towns to decide which towers. It doesn't necessarily need to be every tower has to meet these requirements. It's only towers of regional impact. So otherwise, if it's not going to have a regional impact and the town wants to have lower standards, that's fine. Our obligation as the regional planning commission is to look at those towers that are going to have regional impacts. Somebody may locate a tower on, a side of a hill that the town's never going to see, but it faces another town. So just by the way our hills are laid out, and our town boundaries don't follow any of the topography, so we can end up with towers in communities where it's not visible to most of the residents, but is seen by everybody else.
That kind of was the case at the Lowell Wind Project. The town of Lowell got all the revenues because the towers are sited. Yeah, the wind turbines are sited in the town of Lowell, but at least half of the impacts, some would argue more than that, are being endured by the town of Albany, which got no compensation whatsoever because it's right on that border. So.
But I didn't find that concern. I found that in those two chapters, but as I read through the other goals and strategies, I didn't see a lot of those. I don't see that there are a lot of Act 250, but I was also looking at places where, where is a child care facility going to have regional impact? Other than wanting to have something in there that says we support them. There are a lot of the goals that I didn't see as needing to have stronger language in order to ensure Act 250, but I wasn't, as I said, looking entirely for that. But I thought the strategies looked good from a work plan standpoint. I thought it laid out nicely what we as the Regional Planning Commission should be doing to advance these projects going forward. But we also have an obligation, if we want to have Act 250 effect, then we need to have stronger language in those two areas, the historic resources and the telecommunication towers, because Act 250 impacts for water and wastewater, there aren't going to be Act 250 permits on those. So those types of things. So that was just what I'd noted. That was it from my comments.
Okay, I'm back and I'm alive. Sorry about that. That's what this cold has been, is like all of a sudden it takes over your life. Are there any more comments? Anything from staff or?
Oh, one small comment I had. There's a map in the middle of the document. I don't have the document open in front of me. It would really help to have a couple of labels in there to figure out where you are, just looking at a bunch of locations of electric utility items. Montpelier. Just a couple of town names or reservoir or river names or something. It took me a couple of minutes to figure out what I was looking at, and a couple of labels in the map would have helped.
Yeah.
There's going to be a substation in Waitsfield, Facein, right in the middle of a wetland. It's the one area of the wetland that is not a wetland.
Oh.
But you have to go through the wetland to get to it. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then one last item, Alice.
Yeah, sure.
It sounds as though we've moved on from the idea to separate this infrastructure chapter into two chapters, but I'm just looking at the requirements of the municipal plan, and it talks about a utility and facility element. It's not a utility, facility, and service element. And I don't think we're bound to put things in the silos that this calls out as long as they're in the plan somewhere. But the grouping here is utility and facility.
So did you want that changed or it's okay?
No,
or-
no, it sounds like, I'm a minority of one here and I'm over it.
Okay. No, you were a minority of two for a while. And I started coughing and I didn't care.
But I do hear that it would be good to have a separate introduction chapter for the services section
Yes.
or the social infrastructure chapter. And then what about the separate aspiration that carries over from the now no longer existing healthy populations? And that aspiration is to stimulate a healthy, active, and connected population in communities that work for all residents. Do we want to include that in this chapter? Or does that not really encompass everything that we're, because it doesn't talk about health equity, whereas an introduction could.
Yeah. I think. Well, what do we want to do? I mean, you can include health equity in that opening statement.
Which opening statement, Alice?
The one about being a healthy communities.
Are we talking
So-
about that at the beginning of the infrastructure chapter or at the beginning of section 4? I forget what section 4 is called at this point.
Yeah, I would think at the beginning of section 4, correct?
So I would have a separate introduction and a separate aspiration statement, but that aspiration statement would be modified to include health equity.
Yes.
Okay.
And then this could all get tied in to the climate change chapter too. So, you can make the statement here and then make more specifics on how to get there in the climate change chapter.
Sounds good.
But I think if the initial introduction, that page 1 introduction is meant to introduce the whole chapter, I think you should have another paragraph or something that goes and acts as a preamble that goes through and says this chapter includes, these utilities and facilities and
Yeah.
and the social and community public health.
Yes, I don't think there's a problem in repeating that at the beginning of section 4. And also having it in the preamble in the beginning.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was in the preamble because the preamble just really talked about the infrastructure. And if you were trying to understand what was this chapter going to talk about, you wouldn't have any idea that all of this, half the chapter isn't even mentioned in the introduction. So I just wanted to make sure that was touched on in the start.
Okay. And then the goals and strategies will be moved to the beginning of the chapter. So that'll kind of tie it together as well.
The goals and strategies are not at the beginning of the chapter.
They're not now, but they will be, right? Because that's how the
Goals in the beginning, goals and
goals,
strategies.
right?
in the
Just
end.
goals. Yeah, goals and then goals and the strategies at the end. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
But the goals will help tie it together because it'll have the goals from the infrastructure, from the social infrastructure side of things.
Well, I think we made very good progress on this. And I don't know about everybody else, but I think we'll have a good final draft here from our discussion today. And structure. So-
Thank you very much for the input, especially Mike on the shalls for those telecommunications, because as it was worded with the should, to be honest, I kind of viewed those as worthless statements. We have nothing we can enforce there, so.
Right.
If we weren't changing that language, then just removing them, because it wasn't doing anything. But yeah, I think giving that ability to be able to use that in Act 250 will be helpful.
Okay.
Just to be clear, telecommunication towers can be permitted either by or either through Act 250 or the Public Utility Commission under Title 30, Section 248. And it's the developer's choice as to which process they want to seek permitting through, just to be clear.
Huh.
Yeah, and I think, so I think as long as it's a policy statement, it applies in both systems.
Right.
If we were to say, if we were to qualify at the start of it with anything, we would just say any project of regional impact. And then within our project review committee, we would say any project of regional impact is Act 250 and Section 248. But I don't think we need to qualify it because of the conversations we've had with Two Rivers and those folks. They were pretty clear. As long as it's a policy statement that's clear on the shalls, we shall be doing this, then it's we can apply it in either of those situations.
Yeah, the language, they call this language directive language. And I think that's born from some decisions at the environmental board back when the language needs to be directive. As opposed to aspirational.
Okay. Well, it's a little bit over 5:30. Is there anything else here?
The energy, how to
Just-
proceed with the energy chapter.
And what was the outstanding question on that?
Yeah, so the question is, it sounds like the goal now is to begin we'll be meeting twice in January, and those 2 meetings will be on the energy chapter. So what I'm trying to wrap my head around is the energy chapter and the energy element. And do we get, no?
No, I think that we're using element and chapter interchangeably in our discussion. I think what we talked about was an energy plan, which was an appendix or addendum, and an energy chapter, which was an overview at a similar depth to what the other chapters are of the regional plan, similar to how it was done in the 2016-20 plan.
But I had a discussion with Christian that got me very confused on energy chapter and energy element. And my question involves, can we separate them? Can we have an energy chapter and then just the energy plan or element, which would be the appendix?
The element, sorry, I can jump in here.
Well,
So the energy element is statutory language. The energy
Right.
element can be a combination of an energy chapter and an energy plan, which is an energy chapter in the body of the regional plan, and an energy plan in an appendix would together add up to the energy element, which if the sum total, whether it's in one part or of all the energy related content in the regional plan, needs to add up to meeting the statutory requirements of the energy element. So the energy element, I think I would encourage you folks to remember that's just purely statutory. That's all encompassing. All the energy content needs to add up to checking the boxes in statute. And then energy chapter, energy plan, I think, as Doug is putting it, is a good way to look at it. It could be energy chapter, could be in the body, energy plan could be an appendix, and those two could add up to be the energy element. It's really complicated, but yeah, that's.
And it's kind of what we talked about originally about the accessibility piece of having a plan that is kind of more lay person facing, that's readable. And I'm seeing that as the energy chapter would be that. And then the plan would be a deeper dive into people who want to know more about the technical aspects of the energy plan.
Which is what was in the previous regional plan for the record, as we discussed. So those two would add up. Yeah, as Eli said, those would add up to the energy element, which would be what, the land use review board is assessing, whether that meets statutory requirements.
And the energy plan, if I'm not mistaken, is what, if, when the Public Utility Commission is reviewing a project under, say, our regional energy plan, we would receive substantial deference once that plan has been gone through the process of approval. And so if the plan is written, again, in aspirational language, you get substantial deference to weak language and it gets you nowhere. So it needs to be really well thought out how we, couch, the positions we take so that it has an effect, as Mike has said, at the PUC process. That's it.
Okay. So should we consider a meeting where we start reviewing both? Or do we start the meeting, having one meeting just reviewing the chapter? That would be in the body of the regional plan.
I think the chapter is the low hanging fruit. And that the energy plan review will take a few passes. I think it makes sense to get the chapter through in the first session, and hopefully that gets done in one session.
Mhm.
And then let the energy plan follow. That'd be my thought.
So we'll get a draft from Sam that we're going to review on, is it the 7th of January?
Yeah, she said she should have it to you by the end of the month, December 30th.
Okay.
She also.
I just don't want to get it the night before the meeting.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah, that's,
And-
yes, we hope.
And want to be crystal clear about what the deliverables are from Sam, that time in advance. So it's like, I think up to this point, it has not been clear. So I think if you could reach a firm, like, we want energy chapter and energy plan, or we want one short and one long, or we want one total. Like that, that would be really helpful if we could just have like absolute concrete and we just stick to that moving forward.
Well, I still am at a place where I don't know where we are on this. Has that thing been pared down from what we approved last summer? Which was, again, my complaint was it was a totally different plan than was in our previous regional plan. And it was, what are we getting? Christian characterized it as a tome. Are we going to get something concise and readable and usable? With, I don't know, footnotes and references to whatever, references were used to arrive at the language. I don't know. But
John, that's the energy chapter you described.
Right.
yeah, right.
And the energy plan is still a massive document.
Okay, well,
It
should not be a massive document. I
Yeah.
mean, none of this stuff should be. It becomes unusable, and it becomes ready for problems if we are going to participate at the Public Utility Commission, and we have to make sure we have 157 pages in a plan aligned with our regional plan energy section or chapter language. There's going to be a misstep. There's going to be some language that erroneously is in conflict, and the developer, to the extent that that conflict and highlighting that conflict is to the benefit of them getting a project they want to get through rather than what the region wants to see, they will utilize that. And as a regulator, I learned early in my career that when there are conflicts between regulatory areas of regulatory language, the courts will always rule in favor of the applicant employing the language that is weakest, that is most favorable to the developer. So it's important that everything is in perfect alignment. And I'll tell you, it's an accident waiting to happen when you have an energy plan that reads like that and references all these things and goes all over the place. And takes us nowhere in the regulatory sphere. Maybe we break it out so that we have a section that's just lofty language and what would be great if we were to do all these things. But then we say, in terms of actual regulated development. These are the criteria that need to be applied. Boom. And that's all written in directive language. Boom.
Doug?
I think the 2016 plan addressed that, or no, I read one of the other regional commission plans that talked about, hey, this energy chapter is highlighting the content of the attached energy plan, and this is an overview of the energy plan, and that language governs. I think that was sort of how they approached it. So it was a greatest hits presentation at the same level of depth as the rest of the regional plan, but deferring to the to the energy plan that was an amendment.
Yeah, I agree. That's that's the better approach to go. And it is adopted. The energy plan, that big meaty document, is attached as an appendix. So it is adopted. It is a part of the regional plan, and it does all apply. But there is the shorter version for the public to understand the highlights. And then there's the meaty document in the end. But we'll have to have the conversation first about the meaty document in the end, because the second one's just the summary of the larger one. So yeah, I think I would rather see it as the two pieces, because we have to have the energy element, which is we have to have 150 pages because that's what it takes to make an energy element. But I would rather see a bunch of that move to the appendix as the attachment, and we'll get through that first and then have a summary chapter that kind of brings it down to earth for everybody who's just trying to understand what's going on.
So you'd like to be reviewing the energy plan at our coming meeting?
Yeah,
I think if the energy summary is a summary of the plan, we need to review the plan first before we review the summary of it. That would be my thought.
The last draft of the energy plan, just it incorporated language from all kinds of organizations and studies that didn't need to be incorporated in at that level of detail. It could be referenced. They could put a chart in there and then have a reference, or footnoted as to where it came from. We could direct people if they want to get into the details. It does not need to be as full as that last iteration was last summer. It's unreadable.
Sam is setting up office hours for a weekly check-in with anyone who wants to go over the energy plan. From last month's agenda, page 2 and 3, she actually outlined all the discussion points that she wanted to have. It might be worthwhile. That's from November 17th. To review that, but she is also asking if there's a date and time preference for you to have the check-ins. She said maybe Thursday or Friday might be better for some, but it's up to you. She'll let you suggest some times. And that way, when we get to the meeting January 7th, you will have had input for it. So, but I would look back at her discussion points, because she did outline what she thought was needed to move the plan forward.
Alice, did that come through to the committee in the agenda, or did that not come through to us?
It did. We didn't get a document. I don't know if we got a document on it, but we did not get to it in that meeting.
So those discussion points and the most recent version of the energy plan, which is considerably shorter than the one that was adopted this past summer, were sent in November, and very soon before the meeting, but they are sent there. So a question is, if you want to proceed with reviewing the longer energy plan at the January 7th meeting, do you want to go off of what was sent in November, which is still very long but shorter than what was adopted in the summer, or do you want Sam to produce a shorter version of that, to send before the January meeting.
Well, Will, how long is very long? Is it over 100 pages?
No,
Under-
it's,
isn't it?
it's, yeah, it's, not quick reading. I did read it, start to finish, and it took a lot of time, and focus, but, yeah, do you want to, address that was already sent, or want to get a more brief version of that?
So what was Sam's ultimate recommendation? Was she looking to have it as one large, did she already put it together as one large document? And now the question is, do we break it into two, or did she already have it set up as two?
I think it's,
Yeah, I mean, she's moving forward based on the last recommendation to have a shorter kind of energy chapter, but it's more of an executive summary. And then the rest of the plan would be put into the statutory requirements plan.
I would recommend, though, this as staffer, the committee absolutely do what you want. I would recommend energy chapter starting with, yeah, yeah.
With
The
what,
chapter
Will?
summary of the plan.
A summary of the
Yeah.
plan, yeah, that might help you access the larger document.
The larger document.
I would recommend starting with the smaller document, and then as kind of a way into the larger document, and then like, okay, what do we want? I don't know. It's, yeah.
Well, if we're only gonna, if this thing is as large and time consuming as Will has said it is, and if it's as concise as it can be and still meet statutory requirements, then we cannot hope to deal with this in 2 meetings. That's all. But maybe we give 2 meetings attention to it, serious attention to it, nothing else. And then see where that leaves us with an understanding it's likely going to take more time. That's just a more elaborate responsibility. And we'll just circle back to it as we move forward.
But I think to answer the question of the format, do we want one giant document or do we want the 2 pieces? I think it sounds like we're leaning towards the 2 pieces side.
Right.
Right.
And then how we review it. I mean, if both pieces are ready, then send both pieces to us. But if, only one is ready, then I guess we'll start with that one.
Yeah. Send them in Word format like you did with the
Yep,
infrastructure.
in Word format.
Right.
And
With a draft and date footer, please.
Right.
Yes.
and it's meant to be the current, replaces anything else that was before it. Okay.
Exactly.
And
Will, you suggested that the plan is still pretty dense. If there's time and it's possible to make it more accessible before it gets sent to us, that would be wonderful. It still has to meet the statutory requirement, but I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on that.
yeah, and I'm looking at the time frame here leading up to January. What are we looking at? January 7th? So there's one.
It might be helpful. I don't know, Will, I don't want to task you guys with much more, but if you popped an email to Peter Gregory and ask him, 1, did you guys write your regional energy plan yet, draft or otherwise? And the answer is yes. Could you please send it to us? And if his is a 150-page tome, then I guess that's what it is. If his is 22 pages, then I think we need to, see why he can meet statutory requirements in 22 pages and why we need so many more pages. So
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Could we, let's see, could we say that I'm looking at time frame to be able to, how much time does everybody want to review these documents before before January 7th?
well, if Sam's going to get it to us before the new year, that would be helpful. That gives us a week to go through it.
I'm ready to ask for it on December 27th.
Okay, well, everyone's on a holiday, so.
Yeah. Well, still, if we get it on the 30th, it's still New Year's Eve,
Yeah,
New Year's Day.
Yep.
That gives us 1, 2. I hate to spend my weekends again. 1, 2, 3 working days to review it.
mhm.
Is that enough time?
Yes,
3 working days. I don't know. I see how large it is. I didn't look at it, the one in November.
we're not gonna do a comprehensive review, but it's what I think we get and enough to move it to the next level.
Okay.
Well, if Will can get us the Two Rivers or some other, if there's some other regional plan out there that's
Yeah.
already done. I just like to do a side by side content wise.
So I'm looking at Two Rivers and their 2017 energy plan was 60 pages. The one they're working on now is currently at 30 pages. So it's much shorter.
But is that a full draft, Nikki, or is that something that's could end up being 60 pages? I don't know.
This is their 2020 regional plan for energy. So it says it's 30 pages and they have the citing
There we go.
criteria.
That's, I believe 2020 is when the law changed to allow substantial deference. So that's what we need. There has been some law change since 2020 though, right? That Sam's trying to address. With the Global Warming Solutions Act and all that jazz. But that's helpful, Nick.
Yeah, so I'll ask Peter Gregory and talking to Gina Baber, who's been the lead editor for Two Rivers, see what the current status is and pass that along. And if I can get that draft, I'll just forward it to you folks.
Yep.
Obviously just to, skim and kind of get some idea.
And just to be clear, Peter Gregory was a fixture at the State House when these bills were under development that, dictated what needed to be in these augmented energy plans to get substantial deference. He testified numerous times and was actively involved in the development of that language. So he knows it inside and out. His plan is most likely to be on point and as concise as it needs to be. So it's a good reference.
So why don't we say that we want what is available as soon as possible?
In Word format,
In
please.
the Word format.
She is supposed to be sending you an email either tonight or tomorrow. If you don't receive that, reach out to us and we will communicate that.
An email about what?
I think what she wants to set up an office hour with you, but either way, we'll still tell her that she's, that you would like a copy of her current progress
Right.
energy plan.
You know,
I'm not
what-
going to have time to meet in office hours between
Yeah.
now and New Year's. I mean,
Yeah.
the holiday week, families around, and so it's a busy time. And I understand it for staff as well. I don't want Sam to be doing that during her Christmas break. So Christmas, New Year's period.
I don't know how long I'll have my choking cough.
Well, we'll
Okay.
tell her to send the latest progress.
Okay,
Yes.
I don't think if there hasn't been. Okay. Send the latest progress by December 27th. I mean, I think it's gonna be getting the energy plan more concise is going to be difficult. I don't know. I guess.
Then maybe we're not ready for the energy. Why don't we do the energy plan in February and let's do something else in January?
Well-
Because
Well, excuse me, the 27th is 10 days before our meeting. Do we need that much notice? We're meeting on the 7th, aren't we?
That's, yeah, so maybe the 30th, I guess that would give a little more time during there.
That's what she's planning.
Okay, yeah, so Sam's planning to send by the 30th, so basically
Well,
what
I'm
she
not-
has by the 30th, I mean, I guess do we want to ask Sam to prioritize the plan or the chapter? And then have whatever she has by the 30th, send that to you so you'll have a full week to review, is that what we want?
I'm not working on this New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. And I'm not really thrilled with spending my weekends on it. I mean, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and I'm making beef bourguignon. So,
Mhm.
you know, and
Hmm.
my daughter's coming over, and, you know, at some point I would like a break. But, you know, if she's going to send it to us on the 30th, that's going to give me 3 days.
Which 3 days are you thinking? The second and third and the 8th, 6th, not weekends?
Right.
Okay.
I would be working on it the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 6th.
oh boy.
So do we want to do the 27th then?
And Christian and I had a meeting on this, and he went 2 weeks ahead of time that
Okay.
we should have
There you
chapters,
go.
you know?
Well, if we were to get it on the 30th and then not take it up until the middle of the month, that would be better. If it's going to be as large as it is, you know.
Correct, yeah. That would be another way to proceed. Get it on the 30th so we can review it for the second meeting in January.
Yeah.
And move something else into the first January meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is 3 days. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm starting to get tired, and I would say annoyed, and, you know, a lot of it is because I have a cold, of getting documents to review in such short time. I mean, it's not like this is the one thing I have to do as a volunteer.
So you
So-
have an energy plan for November. What about trying to get an energy chapter? By say December 27th. Keep in mind that the energy plan from November is many pages shorter than the previous version.
Was that provided to us in PDF or Word, Will?
In PDF, so yeah.
Oh, that doesn't work for me. I've asked Sam to send me after that last meeting in Word. I don't know what the difficulty is. Is it pride in authorship or what? But I shouldn't have to ask more than twice.
All right, let's do it this way. The cutoff for the documents would be the 27th. That's a Friday. That's the cutoff for the documents in where they're at. The energy chapter and the energy plan. And then we will review it. We could begin review of the energy plan on the 7th. And continue it to the next, the 9th. And then continue it to the next meeting in January. If nothing's changed since November, we can get that again. But if there have been changes since November, we should have whatever is up to date as of December 27th.
I'll tell you, if I keep getting PDFs, I'm not taking this up. I want to be
Yeah.
able to go through this stuff, and as Will did, spend the time that it takes. And if it's a day, I'll spend a day, and I want to be able to mark it up with track changes as I go through it. These are suggestions, and everyone else can look at them and agree or disagree, but at least it's done. I don't like spewing into space ideas that we then need to check to see if the language was put in there or put in as we stated. It's wasting too much time. And I'm not going to spend the effort that I did last summer reviewing this thing.
Yeah.
To no end, and then have to debate whether language is in there and nobody even knows, including executive director, what's in there. I'm not doing that again.
All right, so post this meeting, your choking chair will send an email with what we want, which is documents that are current as of December 27th in Word format for a review at the first review at the January 9th meeting.
7th meeting.
The 7th meeting, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I like that.
We just put it in writing. We'll email it to Sam with who all wants to be on it. Will, Nikki, who's here, Eli's
Chris.
here, and Christian.
And Will, if you're successful at getting an alternate plan from Peter Gregory, and please
Yes.
distribute that as soon as you can.
Yes, yeah. Mhm.
And I'll put that in writing to Will.
Thank you, yep. And, okay, so whatever Sam has by, I guess, in the 10 days between now and December 27th, should we ask Sam to prioritize making the plan more concise or making the chapter?
Doesn't
I just-
matter to me. She can send us what she has as
Okay.
of December 27th. The documents. We get the documents, we go on from there.
And if Peter Gregory's plan has everything that's necessary to comport with statute and it's an effectively written plan in terms of doing what it needs to do in the Public Utility Commission process, then to the extent that we have verbiage that exceeds that by dozens and dozens of pages, I'm going to strike and delete everything.
Right.
We don't need that. We're not writing a novel here. It's really a regulatory document. These are regulatory documents. That's why they have this energy plan. It's meant to be a regulatory document. That's what the law intended. And so we need to write it as such.
Yeah. Well, I can work with you on getting what we need from who am I?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sam.
Well, Sam and Two Rivers. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Doug.
Peter Gregory, yeah.
Peter Gregory. I'm sorry.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, okay. I'll just, sorry, I'll say this and leave it be. I think that having a plan would be, I think that having a chapter, I think reviewing the plan, I think it'd be good to have kind of a guide. I think a chapter could serve as an effective guide of like a boiled down version of like what is we going, whatever. Yeah, okay. So, okay. Yeah, we'll so Alice will reach out to Sam with what we need, and you'll get that by December 27th. I will reach out to Peter Gregory, and send to you the Two Rivers, energy element.
Right.
And yeah. And we'll
And
plan on,
if you send an email to Peter Gregory,
Mhm.
I think you should CC your chair and vice chair on that document, on that email. And I will send to Sam, CCing everybody that I mentioned, what we want for our first January meeting. I mean, I'm willing to be the, I'm willing to be the heavy here. And the chair, you know, I mean, it's a chair's job to keep us, you know, on track and with the material we need. I am
and, okay, and then I'll also send out a poll with availability for the two meetings a month for the next 3 months going forward. And then, so I think the tentative plan that we landed on earlier in the meeting, please correct me if I'm wrong, is which is first Tuesday is what we currently have, and then the other one would be third Tuesday. And then January, we might want to do the fourth one because I'll be gone the week leading up to the third Tuesday. Or if we're doing both on the energy plan, then maybe we just do the third Tuesday because he'll have already received the materials. Do you want to just do first and third Tuesdays? And then maybe we could just skip the poll, first and third Tuesdays, January, February, and March. And then if something comes up, please contact, myself, Nikki, and Alice, and we'll take it from there. But let's plan on first and third Tuesdays for next.
This is herding cats, and that's the other job of the chair.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say we can leave it to Alice to to sort everything else out and kind of let us know. I mean, because I've got to get rolling here.
Yeah, believe it or not, I have a planning commission meeting to go to.
Well, let's wrap it up.
Yep.
If we stay long enough, we can have breakfast together.
And I need to find my bottle of nighttime red stuff. So, yeah, and don't get this. If this is just the usual upper respiratory coughing that lasts forever. So,
do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yes. Is everybody ready to adjourn?
Yes.
Sounds good.
So moved.
So, okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All righty. Say goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Nikki and Will, for staying late.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you all for this. Anyhow, good night, Irene.
Night.
Good night.